A new era of civilization is here. The vibrancy and playfulness of 6 has given way to something more brooding. It's no mere facelift. Civilization VII's darker aesthetic is the platter to serve up some fundamental changes to the franchise. Dare I say, the biggest course shift since Civilization IV nearly 2 decades ago. Trade, exploration, culture, diplomacy, cities, independent powers. Firaxis has reworked nearly every key aspect, but that's not even the big ticket. The crucial change comes with deconstructing the whole concept of Civ. Here, you'll have a persistent leader, and your nation will change across the ages. A bold, and let's be honest, controversial choice. This to me is Civilization at a crossroads. 6 was a huge success with 8 years of support, and I wouldn't blame Firaxis for taking that blueprint, changing just enough to make it feel reinvigorated, and slapping on a fresh coat of paint. But this isn't that. This is pretty outrageous, and I respect it. I went into the game skeptical. These new features, ages, Civ Switching, the event system, stacking nation bonuses, they've all been seen before in other 4Xs to varying degrees of success. Whether it suffered the same pitfalls or overcame them, would these changes take away from it feeling like a Civilization game? Would the degrees of separation make it an outlier rather than a step forward? I was skeptical, yes, but open to change. Several games later, I can comfortably say I am on board with most of this new approach. Let's pick it apart, where it's good and where it's not, which new features landed and which missed the mark. This is Civilization VII. So, Civilization. You pick a nation and carry them from early steps into a future setting. That is no longer the case. The time frame now cuts off in the mid-20th century, and the timeline is split into 3 ages: Antiquity, Exploration, and Modern. Once an age draws near, a crisis occurs to add further fuel to the fire, straining your nation in its final days. There's a good range of these, and I like this as a system. It throws a spanner in the works and requires you to think on your feet while adding some flavor and storytelling. Each age brings new mechanics, aims, and a distinct feel. Firaxis have stated that they want an age to function as an individual self-contained match, and you stitch them together to make a full campaign, so to speak. You can start later in the timeline with a bit of a head start, and finishing an age gives a natural stopping point if you're just not feeling it, though you will still earn rewards to put towards the game's meta progression system. These ages are the defining feature, but building a 4X around this concept has been done before. Humankind, Ara, History Untold, and Millennia were all built around a similar concept, and each fumbled the bag for one reason or another. Civilization VII has struck a good balance with it. Rather than tack the age system on to simply break up the game, it's built in as its foundation. They have their own systems and focus points. Legacy trees can be seen as victory paths. In the final age, you'll win the game, but earlier on you are completing these objectives to set yourself up with bonuses to carry forward. You've got direction, and you're engaging with the world in new ways. You're scrapping with neighbors in Antiquity, scouring for new lands to colonize in Exploration, and knuckling down to become an industrial powerhouse in the modern era. It's not simply a new offering of techs and civics, but fresh mechanics to engage with and playstyles to adopt at periodic points during a match. A criticism I've had of recent 4Xs is that system bloat as the game progresses. This does a fine job of reducing that. Each age wipes the slate clean. Some mechanics are relegated or have reduced importance. Outdated improvements and buildings are not offered anymore. Older civics and techs are removed. The game gets streamlined. You start again and take those early steps once more, and slowly more systems are introduced atop a blank canvas. They aren't all placed precariously one on top of each other, leading to a convoluted late-game mess. Ages provide the means to play reactively. You have the option to pivot and focus on other legacy paths. Go from a warmonger to a cultural icon as times change. That's in part down to the inter-age resets, but mostly down to your civilization changing. In some cases, it is a natural progression based on geography or history, say Egypt into Songhai. However, you might fulfill extra conditions, allowing an additional choice based on how you've played. You might break from the expected path, going Songhai into Siam. Most civs will have a logical step into the next age, but the ability to change gear and go in a different direction gives you the means to really adapt to the world around you. A war declaration against you might ruin your plans to colonize the new world and let economic dominance slip away. So you can focus instead on your homeland, relegate your economic civ you are eyeing up for the modern age, and instead push for a science victory. You can have an idea of how you think you want the game to end when you start, but there are no guarantees. Each Civ has their own quirks, strengths, civics, and in most cases, unique approaches to gameplay. This goes beyond flat bonuses. You'll play the game differently depending on who you are. The event system provides further choice, offering quests, objectives, and flavor depending on who you are playing as. At the top level, there's plenty to separate nations based on unique units, improvements, and bonuses. But the events and exclusive civics separate things further. There's a familiarity and ease of access if you want to experiment, but as you play a Civ, their power and capabilities unfold. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say this provides asymmetry, but it certainly separates nations more than the past Civilization games. It's a good balance. Nations feel similar enough on paper, but as you dig down, they will play quite differently. I know the Civ switching mechanic has been a point of contention, and I'm sure many won't be happy with it. I had my worries going in, but it is handled well. You're sticking with the same Civ long enough to grow attached to them, and they all have mechanical identity and plenty of flair and flavour. While you bid farewell to nations past, the consistent identity of your empire persists through your leader. Compared to other games in the series, they are in the forefront much more, and you are constantly reminded that they are present in the game past the loading screen. They don't speak much, but then neither do the other leaders. This was off-putting initially, but I came to appreciate it, given how frequently you are interacting with other leaders, making deals, setting in motion diplomatic treaties. Hearing the same voice lines over and over would start to grate. A little gesture provides that flair, and any spoken words are reserved for key moments, meetings, declarations of war, and peaceful resolutions. This was what softened the sting of Civ switching. Yes, that part of your identity is shifting, and that can be jarring. The consistency comes from your leader. It keeps you grounded, but they're not just a poster child. Each leader has unique perks, abilities, and bonuses, and the more you play as them, the more things you unlock. Be these little cosmetic gubbins or mementos to take into future games, little perks and bonuses to hone your gameplay style further. The Legend system, the game's take on meta progression, was something I was very happy to see. Not a selling point by any means, but it's nice to get a little reward from your games. I never thought I'd want meta progression in a 4X until I played Age of Wonders 4, but now I'm sold on the concept. So ages, Civ switching, leaders. What I would consider to be the three defining aspects of Civilization 7, and they're implemented tastefully. It seems Firaxis have studied the rest of the class, noted what works and what doesn't. They've avoided pitfalls that hampered other games. How they would handle these features was my main worry about Civilization 7. And these may be the major changes, but the novelties seep into all layers of the game, from exploration all the way to extermination. They've taken a look at the pillars of the genre and reinforced some key aspects. The initial exploration phase of a 4X is compelling, and 7 delivers on that. There's a diverse range of biomes available. The landscapes and visuals of the world are fantastic, and they've pulled an interesting trick with cliffs giving an illusion of verticality here and there. Different nodes on the map provide small story beats and early bonuses to whoever gets there first, be they ruins in the world, tribal gatherings, or shipwrecks littering the seafloor. Barbarians are gone, in a sense, and their function is replaced by independent powers. Some of these will attack on sight, but peace is an option. Negotiations can make them friendly, and if they like you enough, they'll declare you suzerain of their budding state. I like this approach, and the bonuses are interesting. There are incentives that reward diplomatic play, however the implementation is a bit one-dimensional. You can't flip city-states who've pledged their allegiance elsewhere, which essentially makes it a first-come, first-served system. But if you miss out, well, they'll all disappear under mysterious circumstances when the age changes, so you'll have another shot later. The starting map is quite small, but 7's big trick comes as you move into the exploration age. The map expands, and a new continent gets added, along with more resources, discoverables, friends, and enemies. I think this is a fantastic addition. It reinserts that exploration phase back into the game, and gives a second rush to settle and discover. It addresses an oversight in the genre, and it is a great step in the right direction. My reservations with it is that it's held back somewhat by the map generation. After experimenting with the map preset types, aside from Fractal, most weren't that interesting, essentially boiling down to 2 large continent-sized blobs. Despite that gripe, it is a good system that can only get better. Yet, it's still not my favorite addition to the exploration phase. 2 words: navigable rivers. Honestly, this makes me so happy. Rivers play a big role here, whether that's as an exploration route or as a feature in your cities. I'd like them to be a bit longer, but I will not look a gift horse in the mouth. All in all, the exploration aspect is treated well. The world is interesting, and you're re-engaging with it in new ways as the ages pass. But as the world changes, so do the powers around you, and there's a delicate balance to be kept there. VII has taken a step back and rethought its approach to diplomacy and trade. Gone are the individual deals for items, gold, agreements. Instead, you've got endeavors, sanctions, and espionage. Ways to help or hinder opponents and provide ongoing bonuses to your cities, or simple disruption for your enemies. Diplomacy has always been a bit of a weak spot in the series, and while this isn't a comprehensive system, I like its implementation. You feel the impact of the agreements with other empires, and it's worthwhile to engage with. Because it's simplified, so to speak, the AI uses the system with some competency. That's an ongoing theme with the game, and it applies to trade too. You aren't making deals for X versus Y. You're sending traders to cities and getting resources back. The AI can handle this, it can't be manipulated, and so it engages with the systems properly. This is felt across the game and gives reason to a lot of the changes. There are no builders, unit types are streamlined, great people aren't really a feature, there's less to trip the AI up, and that in itself makes the computer feel more competent. In terms of the genre, it's still trailing behind, but for a Civ game, it felt decent. There's still some questionable decisions made and parts of the game it doesn't really engage with. Sometimes they'll declare war on you from a distant continent, but they'll never actually follow up on it. But they will engage with diplomacy, they'll engage with trade. They'll use the tools at their disposal when at war, even trying to wrest control of the seas during a conflict, which is good to see. It's still early to say for sure, but it does feel like an improvement to the AI, albeit with a few blind spots here and there. I mentioned before about the lack of builders, and that shadows one of VII's biggest departures from the series. Its cities, or rather, lack of. See, when you send a settler out, you don't get another city to work with, you get a town. Not just a matter of semantics, towns function differently. They've got no production queue, a reduced pool of buildings, and contribute gold passively, and they can be specialized to hone their purpose. Hitting growth milestones lets you place an improvement. So all those mines, quarries, farms, woodcutters which your builder used to make, they are all handled by cities now. You aren't creating districts, but individual buildings in urban slots. These can be paired together, and outdated structures can be built over. There's some adjacency bonus, but it's not as defining as 6. Those juicy yields will come from specialists, which can be placed when you hit population levels. It does feel more forgiving than the district system of its predecessor. If a mistake is made in one age, you can build over it in the next. Visually, it creates something striking. Sprawling cities with swathes of rural land, and improvements built along rivers just fills me with joy. Sadly, smaller rivers do get paved over, but major ones become a feature of your city. Having some towns working passively funneling resources into cities, it creates an interesting balance between playing tall and wide. You can convert your towns into cities if you want, or have them passively producing food and gold to improve a few key locations. The passive nature of towns means you can expand without spreading your focus too thin, and you'll need to keep pushing out your borders to snatch up resources. I've been really enjoying the new approach here. Some of them give passive bonuses to your empire, others can be slotted directly into cities, and their effects change depending on the age. As the game progresses, new resources will be unveiled, so a seemingly pointless bit of land could turn out to be very lucrative in a few hundred years. Resources are not required to build units, but they do provide bonuses. For instance, you don't need oil to build tanks and battleships, but every oil you have will give them a combat boost. They're good to have, but there isn't a frustrating standoff when you're stuck on a continent with only one source of oil, and if you don't have something, you just trade for it. Send a merchant to the settlement that's resource rich, and said resource will become available to your empire. No messing around. A system simplified, but improved. However, there is one glaring issue that hampers all this: the UI. I had problems in that whole area throughout the game, but the resource interface was one of the main offenders. It's cumbersome, poorly laid out, and reorganizing and redistributing goods is a headache. This is a part of the game I like and I want to engage with, but currently micromanaging it is monotonous. But before I stray too deep into UI UX territory and bore everyone to death, let's circle back to the part of the game that will be on the radar of most: warfare. If you're guiding an empire through a few thousand years, you're gonna have to crack a few eggs along the way. War in Civilization VII doesn't stray too far from the series formula, but there are some noticeable changes. The obvious one being commanders, generals and admirals on your front line who will earn experience and levels. They can specialize into various fields, and these dictate the flow of war. The right general in the right place can turn the tide, and their field of command means that their placement is crucial. They can be reinforced from a distance, meaning you can keep funneling troops into the fray from your cities, without having to manually send each unit across the map, and that is a great feature. I am fully on board with these changes on paper, and I think it is a great idea thematically, but it runs into some problems. Firstly, it's just fiddly. More than a few times I accidentally swapped units around instead of repositioning a commander, and yes, that may be a skill issue. But it brings me on to problem number 2. As I said, you can specialize your generals. You might have one who's best parked up with your ranged troops, one who provides defensive bonuses, and one who's reinforcing. Trouble is, you can't tell which is which at a glance. You have to go into their skill tree, which is pretty irritating. Some iconography or the ability to rename them would help this out. Yet, that really is one of the big issues with combat: readability. Units are so detailed and fit in the world around them, which is great when you're sitting there and admiring them, but it becomes a pain when you're rolling across the continent as troops blend in with busy urban tiles. Then there's the bugs. These might be little visual glitches or phantom soldiers left on tiles after movement, causing more confusion. I kept running into frustrations, especially in the later ages, which is such a shame because the bones are there to make this an engaging combat system. There are fewer units, so it's clear what does what. Unique units upgrade through the age, so they have impact for longer. Combat animations are great, and every unit is so detailed. I know I won't be the only one zooming in and getting excited about the minor intricacies on different unit styles. Because of this visual flair, it does feel excellent to sweep across the map with your army. Coordinated attacks feel satisfying, and generals have real impact. Air and Navy support play a huge part. It's got all the pieces there to make it a really satisfying experience. Just the basic mechanical functions need some work. And if that happens, war in the game will be incredibly satisfying. The new approach to military victory is far more engaging, and in modern times when tensions are at their highest, one declaration of war can set off a chain reaction that drags the whole world into conflict. Nations separated by ideologies or old alliances sticking together. It doesn't feel like wars are an isolated instance in the world. You can lend support to conflicts, and the AI will stick together to try and divide and conquer. It feels like a powder keg waiting to go off. Chances are that spot of cheeky expansion can turn into absolute carnage featuring everyone on the continent. And when that happens, it feels good. It feels grand, dramatic, there's gravity to it all. The heavy boom of artillery and the roar of dive bombers, it drags you in. That's something the series always had going for it. In terms of personality, production quality, sound, visuals, attention to detail, it's second to none, and this is no exception. Yes, I've had my fair share of issues with the mechanical parts of the game, but I cannot fault its personality. It's moodier and more serious than its predecessor, and while preference for that is gonna be subjective, the quality of the visuals, the music, the animations, the cities, and the world cannot be dismissed. While I do miss Sean Bean and his fondness of pigs, Gwendolyn Christie does a fantastic job as the narrator.
But in war, fathers bury sons.
Every line has a dramatic sting and feels weighty. It enunciates the more serious tone the game pushes. But as with every Civ game, the feeling of it, its aesthetic and stylings will be a divisive factor. Personally, I prefer this over the vibrancy of 6, but if you don't agree, that's okay. Everyone's got their own tastes. Though I will say a lot of the details I did not like, the lack of voice lines from the leaders, the diplomatic theatrics, the tiles replacing fog of war, I moved past them all within my first game, and came to appreciate this as a sum of its parts and intricacies. There's a lot Civilization does really well. Firaxis has gone back to the drawing board to break down dug-in systems. They have changed the Civilization blueprints. It puts it in line with more unconventional historical 4Xs, and in most cases, this does it better. The late game bloat, lack of exploration past the early age, and attrition caused by constantly stacking systems on top of each other. This takes problems that plague the series and beyond and tackles them. Some are solved, others are addressed and improved. It is refreshing. It doesn't feel like the same old with a new coat of paint and some fancy systems, but a new direction. Civilization at a crossroads. I was fully on board with most of the systems. Others, I could see what they were trying to do, like with city-states and religion, but they fell short somewhat. Despite that, this does not feel like a stripped-down version of the game. Aside from a fourth age, I didn't feel like there were any glaring holes that needed plugging. This to me is the most feature-rich and complete day one Civ game since 4. So much of it was compelling, but there were forces working against it. Some of the systems, legacy paths, and features felt underbaked, but most of my issues came from silly things. Glitches, bugs, systems not interacting properly, or crucial info hidden away somewhere. A UI that, while stylish, puts form over function and requires you to tunnel in to find basic info. The overly basic minimap and lack of tactical map further hinders your ability to navigate around and find what you need. And I don't want to open this can of worms because I am here to review the game and not its publishing practices, but the pricey additions, day one locked content, setting themselves up for an aggressive monetization plan. I know this has become the norm in AAA gaming, but it frustrates me. And I pray we don't see things spiral out of control. But then again, I'm not here to review publishing strategies, but what you see in front of you. And Civilization VII really is a damn good game. It has landed as a satisfying and feature-rich experience. It's loaded with personality, both stylish and striking. The level of detail in units, cities, and worlds sets it up, and the fantastic sound and music seals the deal. I have issues with it, and I hope most of these problems are straightened out before too long. I was frustrated here and there, but at no point was it enough to stop me coming back. Despite initial skepticisms, I believe Firaxis have done a stellar job of shaking up their formula, and they've delivered something that stands out not just in its franchise, but a landmark strategy game, and I am fully into it. I've done my review, and now I'm ready to settle into the game for the long haul. It's got its hooks in me, and the Civilization syndrome has set in, fighting the urge to play one more turn, one more age, one more game. Now, I've tried to be as objective as I can, but I won't deny some subjectivity will seep through. I like the darker, more serious approach to this entry, others won't. Some of you will prefer 6, others will see that this is not 5 redone and gravitate back. A select few will stand there championing Civilization 2. All those opinions are valid. I respect that Civilization takes a different approach each time, though it means not every game will gel with every person. I did not resonate with 6 compared to previous entries, but this appeals to me more. I am excited, though a bit nervous, to see where the game will go next. More civs, leaders, ages, mechanics. It feels dense as it is, but that's not to say I cannot speculate on some potential future features, and I would like to hear from you on that. What are you hoping the future has in store for the game, and what mechanics and features are you most excited to get stuck into? Now, I know everyone's going to want to say the thing they want the most is the inclusion of Great Britain into the roster, but we can assume that's a given. Get involved in the conversation below, and any thoughts, opinions, questions, or issues, I'm always happy to hear what you have to say. But anyway, that's more than enough of me for one day. I've got another Civilization 7 video coming up soon, so subscribe for that if you want some more, or just general strategy content every week. But let's wrap this up. This has been Civilization 7. Despite some rough edges, this is an excellent and unconventional entry into the series, and a refreshing take on a decades-old formula. Thank you for watching.